Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of City Skylines with me, Pug Gaming. Now in this episode I wanted to bring something slightly different to the table. Not my usual build, something very unique, something that hasn't, I believe, been done yet, not to the scale of what I am going to be doing today. But yes, I wanted to bring a Nascar track to the picture. Now you may remember, you may not, but I have already done some car themed builds before. I've done the Santa Pod race track, I've done some go-karting tracks. So this seemed a very good idea to sort of carry on that trend. And not only that, but I'm hoping to join forces with a couple of the workshop asset creators to create a few things for this build, because there's not really much on the workshop that we can really use in such a build. So there's going to be a lot of imagination used with this build, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's get into this time lapse now. So the first place to start is the obvious one, it's the actual track itself. So most traditional NASCAR tracks have the 4 corners, 2 straights, with a incline sort of top corner of the bends where the actual road goes at a slight degree angle, bit of degree banking, so you can get a bit more speed and get a bit more traction upon that. And you can see from the previous time lapse the way that that was achieved was by creating 2 roads, one inner and one outer, and then what you simply do is with the outer road you select the nodes of the corner parts of the track, so the 4 bends, 2 bends, whatever you want to class it as, and pretty much just rise it up until you get the elevated height that you want for the incline. And what I found, which you'll see a bit later on, the best way of doing this was to cover the whole of the area that you're doing. So as you can see from this part here, it'll be from the left road to the right road in concrete or some sort of coverage from the surface painter, and then you can get a much better understanding of how that all comes together. Now you're probably wondering why I started again at this point, and the main reason is the first drawing I'd done of the racetrack was just far too big, so I end up doing exactly the same here in terms of actually building the track. And you can see a lot better here the way that I'm getting the curves on the 2 corners using the Move It Mod tool to bring up the top levels just to get that curve going. And it took a little while to work out which method worked the best. I tried it with 2 rows, tried it with 3, but in the end it looked like the 3rd row was a little bit too much and we got a bit more of a bump rather than a smooth curve on the top. So you can see here we're now starting to add the actual asphalts, and you can see it really does start to take shape at this point. Now you can really see the bends, and it took a little while to get these areas. And the good thing about this, because I'm covering the whole thing in the actual asphalts, it doesn't actually matter if there's these horrible sort of shadowy areas, because they're all going to be covered up in the end. It's good, obviously you don't want to have that on a build where you're going to keep the grass itself, but for this it didn't actually matter. So the next step, as you can see now in the time lapse, is pretty much to cover this whole area of the track in this asphalt. So what I was thinking of doing, I looked at a lot of different images on Google Maps, various pictures from Google of NASCAR tracks, and I wanted to create things, make this a little bit different. There's a few tracks where they have different coloured actual concrete, and I assume that's because over the years the top half of it has been used a lot more than certain areas, so they've redone it but not got the same colour. I'm not sure if it's meant to be an aesthetics thing, but there's a few builds that I'm certainly going to create this and sort of base this on. So we're going to have a different type of colour of this just to make things look a little bit more interesting as well. But obviously guys, please forgive anything that I do wrong here. I'm obviously a Brit and I have never actually been to a NASCAR track, and I've watched it a bit on TV, but in terms of the designs I'm basically just using what I can see and a bit of my imagination as well. There's going to be a few things on here that you're going to say to me, hey Pugs, that's not really something you tend to see, but you have to forgive me and just allow it on this occasion. Now this part of the time lapse was a very, very time consuming part of the build itself. I think overall in the end the build itself took around 7 to 8 hours in terms of its starting and finishing, so keep that in mind when you look at the final take of this, and it was really one of the biggest builds I've done for quite some time in terms of a single project, so definitely something that was very, very exciting to build. So now what I'm trying to do is just build a bit more of the track itself, and using the Move It mod tool, copy and pasting some of these already placed down asphalts, because it does take some time switching back and forth between them. So that was the plan there. Now when looking on Google Maps etc. at different types of NASCAR tracks, I was trying to think of what to do in the central area. I mean, a lot of the NASCAR tracks you can even have camping etc. all within that central point, depending on obviously how big the actual area is. My design prospect was more on a smaller track, even though in the end it does tend to be quite a large area in the centre. But that was my sort of goal, so I was going to have a very small sort of area in the middle where you can park up all the lorries, a pit lane and sort of medical centre, and a few other little bits here and there, but nothing too overkill. Not going to have any sort of camping areas or huge car parks or anything like that. It was more of a case of having something a little bit sort of more petite and smaller, so that was the plan there. And one of the things I really needed to get better at was my placing of these asphalts, and just using the Move It tool just to move them a bit more in line with each other, just to make the actual track itself look a lot more fluent and better. Those little bits do tend to get my OCD going a little bit, so certainly had to stop and fix that. And I noticed whilst looking at some of these different tracks, there's different types of line painting on the maps themselves, on the tracks themselves. Some of them have sort of highway stroke road lanes, and some are just pure concrete, so I thought I'll go somewhere in between the both. So I wanted to have a little bit of definition by having some of these lines around it. Annoyingly, sometimes on zoom out they disappear, but that is just life unfortunately for some of this. And what I wanted to do here was create a grass verge on this one section of the racetrack, just to sort of bring a bit of colour into the build. I did try and use some of the decor at first, but in the end I realised that that wasn't going to work, and we had to go with these placements, which are nice and bright but not as realistic as what I was hoping that the decor could have brought us, but certainly a very good replacement in the end, as you'll see once this all gets put together. So rather than boring you with this very boring stage, I have skipped the whole of the grass placement and also the fences. You'll also see I added a barrier to the pit lane and a pit actual building as well with garages, and as you can see here it's really starting to take shape. And you can also see the different types of tarmac that I've decided to go with. So we've got the top layer as a darker theme, and also the interior as a bit lighter, and we put the stadium around. So I wanted a round stadium to sort of fulfill the sort of feeling of a huge arena. So that was the plan really with that. And as well as these sort of pit lane buildings, I also wanted to create a sort of focal sort of main building area. So I decided to use the same sort of building for the pit lane, but using our imagination here and a bit of our intelligence, I copied and pasted this building and switched it around. We then started work on all of the lines. So these lines here in the corners are for the pit. We also done a sort of middle lane as well, sort of replicating what you tend to see at NASCAR tracks. But the issue we did have is there's no assets on the workshop for any pit lane sort of accessories. So what I did, as you can see here, is I actually built my own using a number of different assets and props all put together. So these are the pit lane terminals. I'm not sure what you want to class them as, but these are the bits where all the communication takes place. And It's a combination, as I say, there's a few assets. It's not perfect, but it certainly represents what I wanted to show off here. And that is yet another amazing thing you can do on this game, and certainly helped by the Move It mod tool. It allows you to pretty much combine whatever you like. So as you can see here, I've done a few different variations of the actual pit lane communication hubs, and extremely pleased with how they come about. So the next job was to place the pit hubs down, sort of make it look a bit more realistic in the sense of the different colours in different areas to represent the different teams. So we're going to just jump into this time lapse just whilst I do this part, and we'll catch up when we start working on some very exciting custom assets. Catch you in a second. Okay, so the next step was to try and find some realistic sort of themed assets that we could use. So obviously the tyres, they're clearly gonna be used in this sort of a build, and also these trolleys, which work really nicely when you stack up some tyres on top. But other than that, there wasn't really too much more that I found on the workshop that we could add to really represent this sort of a theme. So I had to end up sort of combining again, like I did with the pit hubs, my own design of sort of communications. So what I did is I went on the workshop, made a list of sort of vending machines, aircon boxes, anything that I felt that I could resemble and make into a sort of, you know, a similar sort of design to suit this theme. And even these air conditioning boxes on the left hand side looked to me like we could use those as a sort of cupboard, sort of drawers. So it was more of the imagination, just checking what there was in the workshop, trying to think of some keywords to type in to bring in something that we could then design and actually make into some sort of a communications hub. So we're trying to just design anything that we can think that would really fit this theme. So using my cinematic zoom in tip that I suggested last time, I then started to put a few bits together, trying to create something. So here we're trying to create some sort of a mechanical sort of desk with a sort of computer on there as well for sort of diagnostics, etc. So it's more of a workshop bench, I guess, using those air conditioning vents to make it look like they're sort of drawers in the actual design. So it was a lot of trial and error to get something that looked half decent. And as you see, I do change things around quite a lot during this sort of build, and to be fair, these are not going to be seen up close really, they're on distance, so they don't have to be perfect. I just wanted to have something that really represented the theme and just make it look a little bit more busy and realistic. And if there's one thing I'd like you guys to take away from this video today, is the fact that you can do this quite easily now. There's a lot, and I mean a lot, of props and assets on the workshop now which you can really take your advantage of and actually design some of your own crazy assets yourself. And when there's something not there, using your imagination really does excel the game even further, and it really makes me really happy when you try and build something that's not there and it looks half like what you wanted it to look like in the first place. So combining assets and props together really does work well in this game, and it certainly puts a smile on my face when I'm able to do so. So now we've got a few props to add down. It's more of a case of now adding it to what we've already done, and looking at a few videos and clips of NASCAR racing. They are extremely busy in terms of what's going on in the areas, and that's what this build was lacking until this point. So we found obviously these assets from the workshop and built these custom ones ourselves, and it was now just it was pretty much just a point of designing one and sort of copy and pasting it over, really. Just using our imagination to sort of fulfill what we've got. So there's a few times where I sort of copy and paste different parts of what we've already done and paste that over. I didn't want it to look too mirrored throughout the whole design, because obviously everyone's going to have their setup slightly different. So that was the challenging part. Filling in the gaps is always going to be difficult when you haven't got much to fill in terms of what's on the workshop. So using what you can and sort of filling the space you've got is the only way around it, unless you made the actual area smaller. And obviously I already committed myself in this size of actual build, but it worked out okay in the end. As you see, the more I place down, the more realistic and a lot more busy it sort of comes across. So the next sort of 2 or 3 hours was pretty much spent on just placing down these props and assets to create a more busy sort of feeling about the NASCAR track. So we're going to jump into a quick musical time lapse, and when we come back I'll be introducing you to an excellent collaboration I had with one of the workshop builders, and we're going to share them all to the workshop. So I hope you enjoy, and I'll surprise you very shortly. Now, I told you you was in for a big surprise, and here it is. I've been working alongside Beard Monkey, who I believe a lot of you would already know due to his amazing props and assets he's created on the workshop. But we had a little conversation a few weeks back, and I told him about the plan for the Nascar track, and he was more than happy to assist with building up a NASCAR, and they look absolutely amazing. I'm sure you'll all agree. They are stunning, and they will be coming to the workshop very shortly. At the end of this video you should be able to find the link and you can download them for yourself. But it's not just the NASCARs that Beard Monkey does. He's got some amazing work on his workshop, so click the link in the description below to see his full workshop, and I'm sure you'll find many that you'd like to subscribe to. But anyway guys, that brings us to the end of the NASCAR track, and I hope you have all enjoyed watching this video. I've certainly enjoyed making this build. It's really come alive, and the NASCARs themselves have been an additional extra that I was really not expecting at first, but it really does bring the whole thing to life. So I'm going to leave you with these ending cinematics, and I will catch you all very soon. If you enjoyed the video, please drop me a like and subscribe if you want to see more. Other than that guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you very soon. All the best.